It was one of the most popular TV shows over here in the United Kingdom and sold around the world for many, many years. And it was produced by a man that really I was lucky enough to know. Although I was very young when I met him, I was lucky enough to meet him. And he was what you'd call an impresario of, just great qualities, but also a lovely, lovely, down-to-earth Yorkshireman. And this show proved very popular with the royal family. So much so, at one point, they almost ended up being in the audience. As ever, let me explain. Hi chums, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. Lovely to have your company. When you look back at the things that you've done in your career, sometimes you think you can't quite believe it. And I think it happens to everybody. There's certain things that you wanted to achieve when you were younger and, you saw people doing things, you think, well, I wouldn't mind doing that. I remember seeing a very talented young lady who's sadly no longer with us. I met her very briefly, actually in the Old Windmill Theatre in Archer Street in Soho. The very talented Lena Zavaroni. I just thought she was brilliant, Such a powerhouse of a voice, a lovely lady. Actually, I did meet her a couple of times, actually, in summer season as well. But the thing about her was, I was very connected to her because she wasn't that far removed in the age period at that time. And when you're seeing somebody else doing what you want to do, you think, if they're doing it, why can't I? And of course, it's a similar thing when you're in the world of show business. You want to appear at certain theatres. My dreams, I have to say, in the world of theatre all came true. I was lucky enough to hit Broadway. I was lucky enough to appear at the London Palladium, the Lyceum, all the biggies. And, I've appeared virtually in every major theatre up and down the United Kingdom as part of a touring show, as part of a one-man show, doing comedy, you name it, I've had a go. There was one theatre that I really loved, and I did make it, not just once, but quite a few times on the stage. And this is, as it used to be billed, the world-famous City Varieties, known as the home of the Good Old Days. Now, the Good Old Days is now currently being repeated back on BBC 4 on a Saturday night. And I mentioned it recently, getting a phenomenal audience. And this is because it was sort of set in the music hall, because it's original music hall, and Houdini has appeared there. Yeah, not at the same time as me, obviously, and likewise Charlie Chaplin. It's a wonderful theatre because it's an original music hall, And when my dad was starting out, it actually sort of fallen into a sort of bad times, as it were, because they had what they called Rudeville shows on, right? So these were ladies who were very similar to the Windmill Theatre in London, not necessarily fully clothed. And if you're a struggling comic and you wanted to get on, you went to those places. Incredible bills when you think about it at that particular time. By 1953, July 1953, the Good Old Days for BBC TV had arrived, and this was a brilliant idea put together by this man, Barney Colohan. Lucky enough, as I say, to know him and meet him. A really warm, down-to-earth person who, actually, and this is how the world of business works, isn't it, show business, he used to go to the same church as my mum's mother and father, and that's how that connection came right back from being very, very young. You understand, this is how these things work. What was interesting about the Good Old Days, though, very quickly the BBC realised this is a hit, because in my opinion, it's the form of karaoke. You bring somebody on, they're singing a song and they're asking you to join in. So in effect, it was almost early days karaoke. That's what music hall was. Interestingly, what you may not know about the City Varieties is there's only one way off. You can't go off that way. You have to go off that way. You can only come on one side. There's not two sets of wings. Always interesting to note and remember that. This show instantly became mega successful. So much so, it became a firm favourite of the late Queen Mother, and likewise Queen Elizabeth. They loved seeing people dress up in their costumes. And this was because, it was a really wonderful family atmosphere. You had huge big names appearing on the bill, like, Eartha Kitt, Larry Grayson, Frankie Howerd, Morecambe and Wise, all there filmed for television to entertain you. Barney Colohan had already had a very successful time because he was the producer of another mega radio show called Have a Go. And this was presented by another professional northerner from Halifax called Wilfred Pickles, the voice of BBC Radio News, and the very first person to read the news with a regional accent. I mean, that That was a big thing way back in the 1940s. The royals loved it so much that Barney was very keen to get the royal party to come and watch a live recording. It sadly never came to fruition, as he pointed out to me. The problems were that, at the time there were IRA situations and stuff, and they were worried about having them in such a condensed, small place. It's not as big as it looks on television. However, they loved Barney enough to know that by 1981 he'd been very thrilled and honoured to receive an OBE. By 1983, sadly, after 400 plus episodes of The Good Old Days, it was no more. The BBC decided it had run its course, and by the 80s was old-fashioned. It's ridiculous. It was old-fashioned when it started. I would say that it just ran out of great stars, because at that point variety was slightly dying. But as Barney told me, what was really interesting, when he went for his investiture, they said to him, we love the show and all this sort of stuff. And they said, we're surprised you haven't come dressed up in character. And he said, no, that just happens on the show. And they said, oh, well, and he said he didn't know if the Queen was just being slightly amusing or if she actually meant it. Apparently, though, if you wanted to go on the show as an audience member, there was up to a 2-year waiting list because the show was that popular. And when the BBC decided to axe it, there was still the 2-year waiting list. So it goes to show, once again, that whatever, the public are not looked after, but more importantly, The Good Old Days still thrives today. There's around about 180 episodes that they saved. Sadly, the rest have all been wiped off. But it's good to know that even the royals liked The Good Old Days. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.